I'm using simple tools and techniques to upgrade this cheap Dollar Tree desk. Last week I used the drawers in the bottom to make this little nightstand, and this week I'm using the rest of the pieces to make a desk or a table. I'm using the top, back, the two side pieces, and the four legs to make this table. I'm getting started by removing all of the messy hard glue chunks from when I microwaved the desk to take it apart. The glue would resist the stain I plan to add later, and it also makes it harder to reassemble. After removing the big chunks with my knife, I sanded all of the pieces. The original top has a traditional look with these curved edges on three sides. I'm giving it a much cleaner look by removing all of the curves and giving it straight sides. Since the wood is pretty thick and the end grain is really strong, my miter shears couldn't cut through it, so I had to switch to a utility knife. To cut through the tough end grain of the wood, I had to make multiple shallow passes with my knife. Cutting the curved edge off the front is easier because I'm cutting along the wood grain. To cut off the front piece, I'm starting in the middle and working my way to one end, rather than trying to cut the entire length of this tabletop at once. This makes it easier to make this relatively long cut nice and straight. The table I'm making is really stylish but very simple. I'll add the dimensions down below if you'd like to make this from scratch because you don't have access to the Dollar Tree desk. The original desk has four legs that are made of simple square dowels. I'm making the front of the table by adding a leg to either side of this wooden piece that used to be the back. To give the legs more detail, I'm making a simple taper. I have the front board in place to make sure the taper starts below it. Then I make a little line at the bottom and connect the two dots with a ruler. To make the leg slightly angled, I'm removing the wood in front of the line I drew. You can do the entire process with sandpaper or a file, but I'm removing a lot of it quickly using my utility knife. Once it's close to the line, I remove the rest with either sandpaper or my file. This taper is really subtle, but when you compare it to an original leg, it looks a lot more stylish and more in scale. To duplicate the taper, I'm stacking the tapered leg onto the square leg and marking it. You can also do this without taping the legs together as long as you hold the pieces nice and firmly and you make sure they don't move while you're tracing. Just like I did with the first, I'm removing a lot of the bulk and then sanding it. At first glance, it looks like the new leg matches the original leg, but if you turn them around and look at the bottom, you see the new leg still has extra wood to remove. Since the leg on the right has a thicker base, I needed to sand it more. Since I cut the ends off the top piece, it isn't as wide as it was, so I had to cut some length off the front piece before staining. I usually use watered down acrylic paint, but today I'm using real stain. For safety, I'm wearing rubber gloves and a respirator. To make it easier, I stuck all of the pieces down to a sticker. I'm using a thin coat of stain because any pooled stain will become really tacky and may not dry properly. I'm applying the stain with a paper towel because I don't want to ruin any of my brushes. Since I'm applying the stain so thinly and it absorbs into the wood right away, I can turn the pieces while they're still wet and stain the other sides. The top turned out great, but the side pieces must be made of a different wood because they look really different in real life. You can't see it on camera, but the stain made the wood grain look pink, so I'm using watered down brown acrylic paint to disguise it. I wasn't sure how the paint would react with the stain, so I kept it pretty thick at first, but then I added more water to finish the rest of the pieces. Before gluing, I dry fitted the pieces and decided the front and side pieces were too tall. I'm using the old channel where the bottom used to fit as a guide to make it shorter. After cutting away the excess wood, I'm sanding the piece flat on my file. Once I know the finished height of my front piece, I'm cutting the two side pieces to be the same height. Since I used the drawers of this Dollar Tree desk to make a nightstand, I'm missing a skirting board. I replaced it by gluing two popsicle sticks together and cutting them to the same length as the front. I'm beginning assembly, starting with the back piece I made out of popsicle sticks and my two least favorite legs. Some eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed this back right leg has a seam. At some point during this process, I lost the original leg and I had to piece together two old legs from a previous Dollar Tree flip. I'm assembling the table with the tapered part of the leg facing inward. For the front of the table, I'm facing the skirting board down and adding a leg to either side of it. This makes the table flat across the front, but if you want your legs sticking out a little bit on the front, assemble it with the skirting board facing you. While the glue is still wet, I'm using the grid on my mat to make sure the legs are square. To get the proper length for the side pieces, I'm dry fitting the legs and marking with a pencil the appropriate width. To make sure the bottom of the table is square, I cut each of the side pieces the same length. You can measure if you'd like and add some pencil guidelines, but I'm just eyeballing the position of the front, the back, and the two side pieces. When I'm eyeballing something like this, I add all of the pieces first and then I readjust their positioning while the glue is still wet. I wait until all the pieces are added before I try to put them in their final position because it's pretty hard to guess when you only have one or two pieces in place. From one piece of furniture, I made this nightstand and this table or desk. I really love the clean lines of this piece, and you could also add faux drawers or real drawers across the front.